Hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome, everyone, to Read 650. Hello, I'm Ed McCann, and before we get started, I ask that you silence all those electronic devices, but not before tweeting and Instagramming where you are right now and making this look like the most fun place to be on a Sunday afternoon in New York City. Videography and audio is prohibited, but again, take photos and share them on your social and let folks know what you're up to. Today's show is called Time and Money, and I'm Read 650's founder and editor. And we take our name from the maximum word count of the true story submissions we present on our stage and in our regular podcast. 650 words translates to a 5-minute spoken word performance. And holding a reader or a listener's attention in that tight frame, which is just 2 double-spaced pages, might look or sound easier than it is. But all the talented writers you're going to meet today rose to that challenge, and we've collected their work in this printed anthology, which is available with many others out in the lobby afterwards. And those will be available for sale along with many others following the show. We are also happy to be welcomed back to a stage in New York City, and especially for the invitation to return to City Winery. And we thank CEO Michael Dorf. It's exciting to be here at City Winery's spectacular new flagship location. And several of the writers you'll meet today have told me how excited they are to participate in the show and to be back among people who value writers and writing. And I thank you all for being in the house, for vaxxing up and masking up and coming out today to support good writing and the spoken word. And you make it possible for us to be here in this space today. And we simply cannot do this without you, so you should give yourselves a hand, please. We'll start there. We had many terrific submissions on these 2 topics, and we have curated a baker's dozen to present to you this afternoon in 2 acts. So we're going to get started right away with Elizabeth Pimentel. And Elizabeth describes herself as being, in her youth, what her parents warned her against. She left her conservative family in Massachusetts to attend NYU, where she helped take over the university to protest the Vietnam War. In Washington, D.C., she was jailed for attempting to shut down the government. And after college, she joined a commune in Denver and drove a taxi. And for the past 30 years, she's taught neuroanatomy to medical students. So you can see how those things all tie together. She's been published in the Washington Post, Salon, the Daily News, and other publications, and she's currently writing a memoir about cab driving. She and her husband live in the Bronx, where they raised 3 boys, and she opens today's Time and Money show with a tale of time entitled Run, Talk, Bond. Please say hello to Elizabeth Pimentel.
Okay, you got the first hour. I'll take the next, I said to Elaine as we ran the loop around San Francisco's Lake Merced. This meant we'd have to circle the lake twice, something we'd never done before. With the return of the New York City Marathon, I recall that time in 1981 when we upped our running time and our chatter, putting ourselves on the road to being marathoners while also working out some personal issues. It's said men form friendships by sharing activities and women through communicating their emotions. If so, then Elaine and I are truly friends because we bonded both ways simultaneously. We were 30-ish and healthy, able to spare an hour every day after work to run around Merced. While we ran, we talked. It made the time fly and helped us sort out our lives. We'd met on the neuro ward of a large San Francisco hospital. She was the social worker, I the physical therapist. As these were high-stress positions, our runs were physically and mentally therapeutic. We discussed work, family, social and political issues, and our romantic relationships. I suggested upping the run to 2 hours because Elaine had spent the first loop telling me about hearing from her former sweetheart. I hadn't yet vented my concern about my new boyfriend, Mike, and needed another lap to do it. He's Jewish, I said, and his mother is a Holocaust survivor. She's not happy with me. I was raised Catholic, and neither Mike nor I was religious. Even though we weren't religious, he was very close to his mother. Elaine, herself the daughter of Holocaust survivors, could relate. Don't worry, she said confidently. If it becomes serious, you'll work it out. The next week, after we'd gotten in 2 hours, it was Elaine's turn to extend the route. Wondering whether to reignite her relationship with her old flame, she said, let's up it to 3 hours. After that, it was easy to commit to a marathon. The Golden Gate Marathon was 3 months away. We'd consulted a 16-week training schedule and were well into the second month. We happily learned that you don't have to complete 26.2 miles before the race, only 21 miles. At that point, presumably, your body can go the extra distance on race day. Running over 50 miles a week takes up a lot of time. Because we both worked, our runs were relegated to the evenings. As the days got shorter, we shifted the longer sessions of over 3 hours to the weekends. We never wavered, despite commitments and demands put on us by others. Once, friends invited us to meet for dinner. We computed the time from my apartment to the restaurant as 2 hours, just what we needed for that day, and ran to the bistro, chatting all the way. On the big day, Elaine and I ran the first 21 miles together. We felt strong as cheering spectators motivated and sustained us. Elaine broke out ahead in the end, finishing 5 minutes before me in just over 4 hours. Mike ran those last few miles with me. Quieter than Elaine, he spoke mainly to encourage me. He would eventually become my husband, and together would run the marathon of marriage, so far for 39 years. His mother got used to me, and yes, we worked it out, as Elaine predicted. I've never entered another marathon. I found lots of excuses: raising a family, working long hours, taking classes, but the main reason is I didn't have Elaine to talk me through the grueling training period. The health benefits of long-distance running are indisputable, but the bonds created by sharing our feelings were, for me, the healthiest part.
Thank you. Ann Casapini has been a yoga and meditation instructor since 1995, and she also loves to write, sing, and dance salsa. Her stories and essays have been published in multiple literary journals and magazines, and she studies writing with Stephen Lewis. She is also a repeat contributor to Read 650, who lives with her family in Tuckahoe, New York. And Ann's contribution to our special Time and Money event today is a piece she's written called Moment to Moment. Please welcome Ann Casapini.
These days, my brother has time to write 6-page letters to me, my sisters, our mother, and our cousins. Every month, every birthday, every holiday. He has time to read any and every book he can find. He even reads the weekend New York Times, from the front page to the last. He tells me he does things he's never had time to do before. Sews tears on his khakis and buttons on his shirts. He writes down lyrics to every single song he's ever known. In his spare time, he even writes term papers for young men aiming to complete their high school equivalency. In contrast, I'm always running somewhere, balancing work, parenting, caregiving for my elderly mother. I can't remember the last book or newspaper I've read. My brother says he fills time by walking for hours a day, doing landscaping, working out, or playing the occasional game of chess. He has so much time. He describes staring at the ceiling for hours, watching shadows shift as the sun moves, witnessing spiders weaving their webs, ants creating their homes, birds building their nests. While I keep examining our childhood, desperately looking for some explanation of how my brother got where he is today, he has become skilled at not thinking about the past. I continue to wonder, was his brain damaged when he was working at the bowling alley? The time that he reset the pins and a bowling ball fell on his head. Was it a lack of connection to our father who was old enough to be our grandfather? Or could there be mental illness in my family? But my brother doesn't seem to care about cause and effect. His former life as an electronics technician, nature lover, and dog owner is over. Since he has nowhere to go, he now never hurries. Relatives live many hours away. He doesn't expect visitors. There is no one he wants to talk to. Months pass without him saying any more than, "Yes, sir." "No, sir." "Present." At the beginning of his time at the Colnbrook prison, he told me he worried constantly. Will I be abused here? Become forever dependent here? Get sick and die here? Now, after 5 years in, he says he just concentrates on what's in front of him. Instant coffee, a 3-inch pencil, a piece of cardboard acting as his desk. His possessions are distilled down to a shared plastic molded chair, a 2-inch horsehair mattress, a 1-foot by 3-foot locker into which he has taped 4 photographs of our family. He tells me he's trained himself to deal with time in increments of 60 seconds, individual moments he can get through. He gave up struggling against the guards, stopped doing hunger strikes to protest the inhumane conditions, abandoned filing forms to fight for his rights. Moment to moment, he strings out his days and weeks and months and years. He says he's now resigned to do his time, unlike me, who struggles to accept the fact that my brother is sentenced to 21 years. Now he seems almost Zen-like, or zombie-like, in his words and actions. Unlike me, who is raging against our country's unfair mandatory minimum laws, I keep writing and calling my representatives, hoping to change these laws. My brother insists you can get through 1 minute of anything. I don't believe him. How does he deal with sharing an 8x12 space with 2 obese strangers? Or spreading his butt cheeks during strip searches? Or punishments of solitary confinement with no windows and only an hour a day out of that cell? Lately, my brother tells me he sleeps many hours a day. Unlike me, who isn't sleeping well at all because I am constantly worrying that any minute might be my brother's last.
Mandy Rosenthal also sends regrets. She has taken ill and cannot join us today. And so we move on to David Masello, who began his career as a nonfiction book editor at Simon & Schuster, then went on to hold senior editorial positions at many magazines, including Travel and Leisure, Art and Antiques, and Town & Country. He's currently executive editor of Milieu, a magazine about design and architecture. A widely published essayist and poet, David's work has appeared in the New York Times, Best American Essays, and numerous literary and art magazines. He's the author of 2 books on art and architecture, and he lives here in town and joins us today to read Time to Go Home. This is David Masello.
When I was young and single, going to gay bars alone felt like a necessary duty, something to endure for the betterment of the self. Go now, I'd coach myself late on Saturday nights in my 11th Street tenement, knowing even then, as a 20-something-year-old, that youth was a temporary state. Stay here, watch another ancient rerun of The Honeymooners, and you're guaranteed to remain single. So, despite the allure of a warm bed, the mewing of cats in the courtyard below, and the comfort that came with hearing the black and white era banter between Jackie Gleason and Audrey Meadows, I would dress the role and make my way to the bar of the moment. I might walk east a half hour to Boy Bar on St. Mark's, where, ominously one night, overnight, the bartenders had donned elbow-length rubber gloves in response to an epidemic that seemed unstoppable, afraid even to put their bare fingers into used glasses. I might go to Wildwood with its flannel-clad urban lumberjacks. Not my aesthetic, but at least I stood out. Uncle Charlie's and unsexy Murray Hill. The Web, with its colonial-era dynamic of younger Asians seeking older Caucasians. Or the Ninth Circle in the Village, where its Dante-esque underworld basement was populated by rent boys, while upstairs the hoi polloi and haughty alike gathered in a hellish limbo. It was there, apocryphally, that Edward Albee found his title, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, scrawled on a restroom wall. Also, where I met virtuoso pianist Vladimir Horowitz, who, upon my asking if it was really he, said, pinching white gloves from his fingers, I am, indeed. Wherever I wound up, I would leave by 1 or 2 a.m., often haunted by the visage of a certain stranger in the crowd I hadn't the courage to approach. I'd ponder on my train ride home the idea of placing one of those I saw you, you saw me ads on the back page of the Village Voice, though the urge would fade, like their image by morning. But I was grateful, too, to be heading home alone on the subway with the Sunday Times in my lap, its weight and just off the press warmth sufficient to evoke the presence of another person. I no longer go to gay bars. I'm no longer even in my 50s. Hardly an asset in such places. And I don't expect to be any more adept at negotiating bar protocol than I was in my 20s. When I look into the few bars that exist along 8th Avenue or Christopher Street, as I pass them, I see faces in the crowd lit by the screens of their phones, an easy ruse for pretending to be engaged with others elsewhere to avoid the live bluntness of rejection now. We had no such props, apart from the lighting of a cigarette or fishing in a cocktail glass for the maraschino cherry. Yet, I feel a certain nostalgia for the bars I used to visit, because they were places where a young gay man could be surrounded by his peers, be actually shoulder to shoulder with them. Something you realize when you're older is that you were attractive as a young man, though you didn't know so at the time. Although the bar house odds of meeting someone never improved for me, there was always the lure of the jackpot, sex, a new boyfriend, a real new friend. There was also the guarantee of disappointment and hurt, boredom, ego-deflating rejection, smoke-cured hair, the igniting of a randingness seemingly lit by an eternal flame. Whether I felt welcomed in the places or shunned, flirted with or passed by, I had the privilege of age then, membership a given. I learned early on, and it's an enduring lesson, that the secret strategy for going to gay bars or anywhere in life is to know their limitations, when it's all right to go inside and socialize, and when it's time to leave and go home. Thank you.
Charlotte Adamis is a retired school librarian and former journalist who's made Kingston, New York her home for the past 23 years. Most recently, she's been published in Herstory and the TMA Project blog, and an excerpt from her memoir, which is the story of searching for the wrong biological dad and then finding the right one at age 57, was just published in Hippocampus. She's the mother of 2 adult sons, and together with her husband Tony, they parent one loving but disobedient miniature wire-haired dachshund. And when she's not riding or tromping through the woods near her home, Charlotte volunteers as a social justice advocate. And I'm very pleased she's traveled here today from the Hudson Valley to share her story, Time for Happiness. Please say hello to Charlotte Adamis.
So many years ago, my father and I met for a rare lunch at the Algonquin Hotel. I was 26 and searching for answers. My dad was 59. I asked him if he was happy. Happy, he replied. I don't have time to ask if I'm happy. He would have another 34 years. But I didn't ask him that question again. In the months leading up to his death, as his landscape shrunk to the 2-bedroom Riverside Drive apartment he'd lived in with my mom for the past 20 years, after they sold their 6-bedroom house in Scarsdale, he would often sit in the kitchen and stare at the clock in the microwave. "What time is it?" he'd call out every 15 minutes or so. There was nothing wrong with his eyesight. Another odd habit my father developed in his final months was winding his 2 watches obsessively until he literally wound them to death. This was a man who had spent his entire life in the diamond business. He knew how to care for precious items. Yet after my mother took his watches in for expensive repairs, he found hers and wound that until he broke it too. "Henry," she scolded him one night as the 3 of us sat on the couch in their den. He was at it again, winding one of his newly repaired watches. "I can't do it anymore," my mother cried. "I can't keep fixing these watches. I hide them and he finds them." We talked about getting him a cheap watch to break, but we never got around to it. We ran out of time. My dad's final countdown began on a Friday in mid-November 2021. Although we, his family members, had been preparing for the end since treatment began for his cancer 3 years earlier, none of us seemed prepared for the actual dying. Nor had we envisioned his last days in a hospital. My mother had wanted him to die at home. But on day 3 at Mount Sinai West, the hospice nurse convinced her that wasn't happening. Did it even matter? His only sign of aliveness now was the steady, gurgling rise and fall of his chest. How much longer could this go on? Death, I would learn, has its own timetable. At the end of that day's vigil, my mother held up a baggie with her husband's personal effects, including a working watch. He stopped winding, I asked. I think he learned not to, my mother said. I thought he'd given up. On the fourth day, I couldn't face going back to the hospital for more of the same, and I set out for a long, meditative walk in the park. I thought I had hours. Not 10 minutes later, my mom texted, "Come now, it's time." I ran to the edge of the park and hailed a cab. "My father's about to take his last breath," I told the driver. And then we crawled through a midday gridlock, block by agonizing block. But there was no need to rush. For the next 7 hours, my mother, my 3 sisters, and I, like 5 crazy midwives, urged him to let go. What was my father holding on to? Finally, in the late afternoon, the hospice nurse gently suggested we leave. "He won't let go," she said, "because you're all here." In the wee hours of the following morning, while his family slept in separate corners of the city, my father did indeed let go. And as my mother and I made that final trip to the hospital, our Uber hurtling down the now empty streets, I remembered what he'd told me all those years ago when I asked if he was happy. His answer, that he didn't have time to consider, had cast such a long shadow. Would it have changed if I'd asked again 10 or 20 or 30 years later? I hoped so. Thank you.
Sarah Bracey White is a Southern storyteller who mines her life for poems, essays, stories, and memoirs. Her memoir, Primary Lessons, published by Cavan Carey Press, was made into an immersive dramatic musical which debuted live in 2021 at the Paramount Theater in Peekskill, New York, where Sarah had a starring role. Other literary work includes The Wanderlust, a South Carolina folktale, and Feelings Brought to Surface, a poetry collection. Her work has also appeared in the New York Times, the Baltimore Afro-American newspaper, Scarsdale Enquirer, and the Journal News. She and her husband live in Ossining, New York, and Sarah closes Act 1 of our show this afternoon with Against the Clock. Please welcome Sarah Bracey White.
In 1964, I was a freshman at Morgan State College in Baltimore. I'd chosen Morgan because a young soldier on a train told me it was a party school. I loved it there, he said. You'll love it too. As the youngest daughter of a strict South Carolina single-parent school-teacher mother, I was only allowed to go to school, the library, and church. I was in 12th grade before my mother allowed me to take company on Sunday evenings. The few boys brave enough to face her cold, unwelcoming stare sat on the sofa beside me and watched TV while she sat in her adjacent bedroom watching and listening to our conversation until the clock chimed 9 p.m. My Cinderella hour. I wanted a college where I'd be free from supervision. Mama's sudden death just before my graduation left me unmoored. Dreams of the freedom college life would afford me were dashed when I discovered that Morgan took seriously its duty to stand in loco parentis for its coeds. That spring, I pledged the sorority. One evening, at the urging of 3 fellow pledgees who lived in my dorm, I broke curfew and went with them to an off-campus frat party. I was determined to finally have some fun. The punch was spiked and the music was loud as we danced wildly with Omega frat boys in celebration of our journey into Greekdom. I kept checking the Timex watch on my arm, anxious about getting back to Tubman House before 11 p.m., when the house mother, Mrs. Pendergrass, did room check to make sure that all her charges were settled in for the night. When the party broke up about 10:15, we piled into a green Hudson Hornet, driven by one of the frat boys, and sped back to campus. The plan was for us to sneak into Tubman House between the night watchman's hourly rounds. A fellow pledgee who hadn't gone to the party had agreed to open a side door and let us in around 11 p.m. We crouched behind some shrubbery in the middle of the grassy quadrangle that sat between the 2 women's dorms, waiting for the watchman to punch his time clock and leave the area. Instead, he lit a cigarette and sat smoking in the alcove near the side door, the door where we hoped to gain entry. The clock atop Holmes Hall began the first of 11 chimes. The air was chilly and the grass was damp against my face and legs. I began to shiver. If we couldn't get back into the dorm before room check, we'd all be expelled. I could almost hear my dead mother's voice. All of this because of a party. Her warnings about the dangers of following the crowd resounded in my head almost as loud as the clock tower's chimes. Time was running out. Through windows on the first floor of Tubman Hall, we could see the silhouette of someone walking back and forth along the hallway. Was it our fellow pledgee? Or was it Mrs. Pendergrass doing room check? Suddenly, a fire alarm went off. Within minutes, girls began to stream out of the dorm. Some were fully dressed, others wore coats over their night clothes. Amidst the chaos, we ran from our hiding place and joined the bevy of chattering girls. When Mrs. Pendergrass finally announced that it was safe to return inside, I made my way upstairs to my room and breathed a sigh of relief that my close call with getting expelled was over. It kept my heart racing long after I undressed and climbed into my cold bed. Years later, when I shared that story with a handsome young man I'd met on the dance floor at a Baltimore discotheque, "Let's have a drink and talk more before you rush off," he asked. I glanced at my watch. It was past midnight. I ordered a pina colada. feeling no urge to hurry home.
Read 650 is a nonprofit literary organization with a mission to promote and create performance opportunities for writers. And in a publishing environment where it's often challenging to find or hear new voices, we take that mission seriously, and we've created this quality platform for writers, a forum for true personal stories told 5 minutes and 650 words at a time. These are obviously not open mic shows, and there's nothing random or improvisational about what we do. We place a strong emphasis on the craft of writing, and the submissions featured on our stage were selected and vetted by an editorial committee of writers of essays, novels, memoirs, and plays. And today's event is made possible, as they say on PBS, by viewers like you. Your donation is an investment in our mission, and it supports and enables us to present this quality work in this quality way, and we cannot thank you enough for being here. We are always working to broaden our submission pool and feature new and diverse voices, and right now, with 19 days to go until our April 1st deadline, we're still collecting submissions for aging. And whether you're 20 or 50 or 90, share your personal perspective on aging in 650 words. It's all on the table, from puberty to wisdom teeth to discovering that you've been automatically subscribed to AARP magazine. Which, by the way, through that tricky maneuver, they're able to claim that they have the largest circulation of any magazine, like in the planet. And you'd think they at least would print on better paper stock if that were the case. We're also collecting submissions for expecting, which, as all parents can attest, is not likely what they expected. In 650 words with a story arc, tell us about the excitement of discovery, the preparation, anticipation, your inflation, your ambulation, your suddenly too small apartment, your in-laws, your dog, researching preschools and colleges during your first trimester. That deadline is June 1st. And finally, we're always interested in essays for Between the Lines, which is a regular feature of our weekly podcast. And that's the place where we invite writers of every genre to share their story, their perspective on any aspect at all of writing and the writing life. Even your favorite ways that you've found to procrastinate, or how you have developed your own writer voice, anything at all. There are details in your program and on the website, read650.org. Please follow us on social media, and even better, please share your email address on one of those clipboards that's going around so we can stay in touch. We will never share your email address, and you can opt out at any time with a single click. We send out 2 newsletters a month letting folks know what we're doing and what's going on. And if you're thinking about contributing, please start writing, because we would love to hear from you. Thanks for being here. Enjoy. Thanks. Welcome back to the second half of today's show, Time and Money. And before we bring up our next writer, I want to remind you that the stories that we're hearing today are all collected in this very nice little book, which is one of over 24 books that we have for sale in the lobby, and they are available for purchase right after the show. We have collections called At the Bar. We have Straight Outta Ireland, which is a nice collection. Summer Jobs, Lessons Learned, Siblings. We have lots and lots of them, and they fund what we do. They're full of terrific stories. They're great bedtime reading. They're great gifts, and they sell on Amazon at $10 a pop. But we have a show special, any 3 for $20. So peruse those afterwards, and we will see you outside, and thank you. What else? Oh, I also want to quickly acknowledge a few of the people who keep our wheels turning and make this afternoon possible, for all their help putting this event and our podcast together. I thank my partner in Read 650, executive producer Richard Kolath, our editor Stephen Lewis, David Masello, Lisa Donati-Meyer, and our producer and marketing guru Jim Russick, who's here in the house. For Jim, let's give it up. For her technical expertise and unfailing moral support, I'm especially grateful to Sarah Caldwell, who's here doing all the tech and cameras and everything. Thank you to City Winery's VP of Programming, Shlomo Lipitz, and Ryan Ertractor for their support, along with production manager and audio engineer Aaron Peart, who's over here doing audio. And to the City Winery kitchen and wait staff helping keep us all fed and watered this afternoon. So let's give them their own hand. A couple of things I just want to say very briefly. Many of you probably know that we launched a podcast last spring. We were invited to be part of Carnegie Hall's very first all-digital festival, Voices of Hope. And we pulled together 15 consecutive days of content, which they promoted across all their platforms, and suddenly we had a podcast. And we kept our foot on the gas, and we now are up to show number 60. And I encourage you to check out read650.org. You'll find us there, or your favorite podcast app. And this week, the show that we dropped Wednesday in anticipation of St. Patrick's Day is called Straight Outta Ireland. And it features stories that we recorded at an early City Winery performance at the former location before the Wrecking Ball came for that. And two of the writers featured in this week's podcast, we have them here in the house tonight. We have Malachy McCourt, who is a Malachy, and Malachy, who is a national treasure and who turned 90 this year, as an example to us all. We also have, somewhere in the house, we have Anthony Murphy, who's also featured in the show this week. So someone told me this is the best one of all 60, so I encourage you to check that out. And now back to our show. Levin is a writer and editor who worked for many years as a journalist, including as national news editor at the Associated Press. Before that, she was a reporter at the San Diego Tribune and several other newspapers. She continues to review books for the AP as well as for USA Today, and she's been working on a memoir, 2 chapters of which were published in the online magazine Sensitive Skin and Southeast Review. She opens Act 2 of today's Time and Money show with How to Think About Money. Please welcome Levin.
When my mom's best friend Adele died a few years ago at age 86, she didn't have much money left. That's because in her mind, money was no different than Jeopardy, her favorite TV show. Something to be enjoyed, but nothing to worry about. Which is why when I think about money, I think about Adele. In a world gone wild with excess, she firmly believed she had enough. Adele was a part of my life since before I was born. She moved to Mount Pleasant in early 1954 with her husband, the new optometrist in town. She was just a bride of 21 when my mother, then the sisterhood president at our synagogue, approached her and said she'd have to direct the Purim play because she, my mother, was about to have a baby. That baby was me. In our small Jewish community, they soon became fast friends. Every Sunday, she'd come over to our house to do the New York Times crossword puzzle with my mom and often stay for dinner. One night, my dad told her sternly, "Adele, you don't take money seriously enough." My father did. The owner of the local furniture store, he fretted about every fluctuation in the markets. Late at night, he'd pore over the Wall Street Journal, trying to figure out which stocks to invest in for us, his 5 kids. Adele and my dad were both the children of immigrants. His preceded him in the furniture business. Hers ran a grocery store in a poor part of Pittsburgh. She adored her father and took his words to heart. He once told her, "Never drive a car fancier than your customers." When she grew up, she took that to mean, trade in your old car for the exact same model. So she was stuck with a cheap white Pontiac Grand Am. I doubt she would have even worked outside the home, except that in 1972, her husband died, leaving her at age 40 to raise 3 girls alone. She went back to school, got a master's in education, and held a series of jobs at the local community college and the Pennsylvania Labor Department, where she wrote grants to fund vocational programs for people with disabilities. As a single working mom, still something of a rarity at the time, she paid off her mortgage, sent her daughters to college, and attended every wedding, funeral, bar mitzvah, and bris she was ever invited to. Unlike my dad, she never sweated the details of how to pay for all those trips, or the jars of honey she sent on Rosh Hashanah, or the black caviar she splurged on for her New Year's Day open house, or the boxes of fudge she sent home to her coworkers when she came to see us at the Jersey Shore. She'd show up at our summer rental with a bottle of Bloody Mary mix, a bag of Frito scoops, and her 3-bean salad dip, not caring that my parents were gourmets. In fact, the first thing she did was drive to the supermarket to buy Miracle Whip, because we were a staunchly pro-Hellman's family. Week to week, Adele entrusted her paycheck to TIAA Crave, and when she finally retired, without ever once having checked her balance to see if it was up or down, she was stunned at how much money had accumulated. She used to say she owed her life to the Pennsylvania State Retirement System. Toward the end, when she could no longer live alone, she had just enough to buy a room in a retirement home where she always kept the door open so she could watch the world passing by. She joined the weekly poker game, the only woman among a shrinking pool of 90-something men, and she played the slots at the local casino. My dad would have chided her, "Adele, what a waste of money." She would have said, "But Leonard, I have enough."
Beth Kwon is a writer who has served as a communications director at Columbia University and Barnard College, and she's currently a speechwriter at NYU. A former journalist, she was an editor and writer at Women's Wear Daily and Newsweek, and her work has appeared in Allure, Time Out New York, The Village Voice, and Fortune, among other outlets. Beth also publishes a personal zine called BKNY. We welcome her for the first time to our stage to read Found Money. This is Beth Kwon.
My sisters and I cleared out my parents' belongings in stages. First, the 4-bedroom house they had lived in for 40 years. Then the condo my mom downsized to when we moved my dad to a memory care facility. Then my mom's final apartment in an assisted living community. They had stacks of things that prevented us from walking in a straight line or using the living spaces as intended. My mom only brought her most treasured items to her last home, which we found in a woven bin in a closet after she died. Among them were silver proofs in the shape of $100 bills, Eisenhower silver dollars, John F. Kennedy half dollars, and sets of mint US coins from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Until this discovery, I never knew my parents had collected coins, except for the basket of pennies in my dad's study. The things my parents accumulated pointed to their interests, like the hundreds of Leica and Nikon cameras, and back issues of Shutterbug magazines my dad would spend hours leafing through, or thousands of books on Korean and US history from evening visits to the used book section of Barnes & Noble. Other items made little sense, such as the multiple salt lamps, toothpick holders, and monkey figurines. "It's a collector's item," my dad would say. My parents were practical too. There was always plenty of dental floss, stain remover, thumb drives, root beer, Cheerios, and gasoline in 5-gallon jugs in the garage. Despite the abundance of stuff, I thought we were poor. My mom constantly fretted about money. She was the daughter of a prime minister in Korea and had had a household staff and chauffeur, but the Korean War and political unrest upended her life. When she immigrated to the US in 1963, her family didn't support her, and she arrived with $200. My father's life was simpler, and he too immigrated from Korea with very little. As we sifted through their things, we also discovered legal pads with handwritten credit card records, documenting a $50,000 balance paid off over months. My father made $65,000 a year working at IBM, But as the second eldest of 8 sons, he helped support his family as they joined him in the U.S. We shopped the sales and clipped coupons, but my parents sent us to camps and college. They made sure we traveled. We went to 48 states by the time I was 13, visited Korea, and participated in exchange trips to Europe. I didn't know what to do with the coins, but I started to see them through my dad's eyes and the fascination the currency must have held in his adopted country. My parents surely thought they were valuable, so I took them to Stax Bauer's Galleries, a coin dealer on Park Avenue. As the dealer appraised the collection, it soon became clear my parents were wrong. These were not objects with extraordinary value. It was purely about the quantity of silver. Eisenhower silver dollars don't contain an ounce of silver, so those were rejected. Surprisingly, the Kennedy half dollars, which started to be produced after he was assassinated, were 40% silver and were worth a whopping $7 each. The other pieces went strictly by weight. In total, $299.20. Hardly what my parents would have expected. When the dealer offered me a check, I felt conflicted, even sad. Should I keep the coins, adding to my own hoard to pass on to my children? Was it okay to cash them in? I accepted the money and told myself I was doing my parents right. I still had the Eisenhower silver dollars, so on my way home, I stopped by a bank and exchanged them for bills. But I kept one of them. As my dad would have said, it's a collector's item.
Wendy Goldman began her career as an actress in TV and film and was a company member of LA's famed comedy troupe, The Groundlings. Her stage musical, Casual Sex, written and co-starring fellow Groundling Judy Toll, won multiple LA Theater Awards and led to the launch of a film adaptation for Ivan Reitman and Universal Studios. She went on to success as a TV writer and producer, including executive producer of the critically acclaimed MTV series Faking It. Wendy continues to improvise her way through life while working here in New York, where she teaches workshops using improv games to inspire creativity and shares her expertise as a writing coach. She joins us today to present her success story. Please say hello to Wendy Goldman.
The last time I see Cynthia, she's parked on my street in Beverly Hills adjacent. We just had a celebratory margarita to honor my fancy new job writing for a TV show. The celebration was Cynthia's idea, but by the time we leave Don Cuco, I know she isn't completely happy for me. On the car ride home, I do all I can to downplay everything. Bet my office is going to be the size of a closet. Not even a closet, a pencil case. Too late. Her confidence is sinking. What if she never works again? Maybe she should give up her dream of show business and move back to Columbus like her parents think she should. I try to convince her that she's so talented. Any day now she'll have something to celebrate too. My friend isn't buying it. She just turned 33, ancient in Hollywood years. We're going to be the same as always, you and me, you know? Nothing's changed. It takes a while for her to say, I know. There's a space on my block right in front of my building, which never happens. Cynthia is gripping the steering wheel even though the Jetta is parked. She congratulates me one last time. Her smile is practically a straight line. Then she looks away. I get out, and that's when I slam the car door so unbelievably hard on my finger. The pain, oh my God, it's hot and purple and absolutely stunning. For that second, I'm not somebody grateful to be home or somebody with a fancy new job or anything, but just this finger. And it is screaming, but not me. Cynthia has no idea what I did. Well, good night, I say, normal voice. The passenger window is open a crack, so I know she hears me. It's kind of dirty, but I can see her little sock monkey dangling from the rearview mirror, supposedly for good luck. Her profile is hidden behind blonde curls. They glow in the light of the old-fashioned street lamp, the kind they also have in the real Beverly Hills across Wilshire Boulevard. Cynthia's putting off getting her roots done until she has a pitch meeting or something else that'll make it worth the money. I see her in that same denim jacket and black turtleneck sweater every time we get together now. She's saving her good outfits, just in case. What if the fingernail falls off? Shit, I should be swearing really loud. She could help me somehow, or not even help me, just know that I'm hurting. Tower Drive is silent, except for a police siren near the park. It's after 1 and a school night, like we both still call a Thursday. The trash cans are neatly lined up by the curb. I smell something, not garbage. Is it gasoline? Is it coming from the Jetta? Better not be. Cynthia spent her last unemployment check getting the heat to work. My finger. I'm hoping so hard that I won't lose the nail. It will be hideous on my first day of work. But there isn't even an ow from me. I can't. Not then. Not when I've given my friends so much to deal with already. I can't possibly need anything from her. Yep, night, she says. Cynthia shifts the car into drive and takes off down the street. I wait until she gets all the way to the corner and is making the turn. That's when I let myself see the blood for the first time. How ragged the cut is. For sure, I'm going to lose the nail. The instant I shove my finger in my mouth, the tears come. But that's okay. I can take care of myself.
Emma Suárez-Baéz was born, she says, to a, quote, feminist without a tag, and a man, quote, who walked to school without shoes. She left her home in Puerto Rico at 17, and writing has been the thread that's allowed her to stitch together the loss of territorial, cultural, linguistic, and relational continuity to the complex and confusing experiences prompted by leaving her country. Her work appears in a long list of literary outlets, including the Bronx Memoir Project Anthology and New York Public Library's Library Zine, and she's presented her work publicly at the Moth in the Bronx. Emma holds a master's degree in bilingual education. She's worked with children and teachers in the Bronx public schools, and the piece she presents here today asks the existential question we might all ask ourselves: what is enough? Please welcome Emma Suárez-Baéz.
Papi was a small business owner, a pharmacist to be exact, an entrepreneur to be precise, a slave to be honest. Christmas time meant extra anxiety and work, both of which trickled down to Mommy, my siblings, and me. The phone rang frequently. Who would unlock the cosmetic displays and show perfume bottles to the clients? Who would wrap gifts? One of us had to stop doing the work of being a kid, eating, playing, doing homework, march down the block, and become a man or woman of commerce. Wrapping gifts for strangers? That was easy. Fold the paper over the edge of the prescriptions counter, tear a piece 3 inches longer than the gift, wrap the paper around the present, and fold the edges into sharp triangles. Add tape, and voila. In a hurry, repeat these steps many times over several nights. On Christmas Eve, we stayed open late. We wrapped Camay soaps, Max Factor lipsticks, Q-Tex nail polish, anything. Kids from the projects came with coins, maybe $1, wanting to buy their mommy a gift. So we looked for something they could afford and wrapped it. These gifts were going under someone else's tree, not ours. We children didn't get gifts. We got money. Bills on a tree. No cards, no wishes, no blessings. No one went to the store to find something they heard we liked. No one promised to take us shopping. On Christmas Day, we had money in our pockets. Not a toy, not a book, not a pair of sneakers. Money ate Papi and Mami's time, like the termites eating our home's wooden floor planks and walls. Money devoured their energy, much like the way the burgundy Pontiac Catalina guzzled gas. Rectangular pieces of paper weighing only 1 gram shaped us into aliens on our own planet. Evenings began at 9 p.m. after the pharmacy closed. TV news ensued. Papi and Mami were too tired for conversation, too tired for more responsibility. My papi's ambitions and projects were those of a good-hearted man who walked to school without shoes. Papi dreamt of owning a building, el edificio, a business and home in one location. He wanted his family to have enough. There weren't conversations about what it would truly cost our family to get involved in such a venture. As demolition began in our termite-ridden lot, we became latch and key children in a good enough cement house in another part of town. Papi said el edificio was for us. Actually, he built it for himself. Mami's dreams ended up bottled up on the pharmacy shelves. She fried our eggs in the morning and dropped us off at school. By 9 a.m., she was at the pharmacy. Then she picked us up from school at 1:30, took us home, cooked, and drove back to the drugstore by 3. Came back to make dinner around 5, and then left to the pharmacy again. The missing and the silence were too loud for anyone to stand. Its persistent ringing eventually propelled me to another continent. When my husband and I became city workers, we named over time blood money. Its lure, a dim light in my being. To know what is enough is true wealth, says the Tao Te Ching. Whenever I felt the pull, the drifting towards more, bigger, better, and this is for the kids, the light turned neon blue. We stayed in the Bronx, paid for private school. We bought our small house later than our peers. Yes, yes, money has its majesty. I stand on the effort and the money me papi and mommy made. However, instead of the cha-ching of the cash register, I wish a card came with their gift. A card with pictures and words carrying sounds like humming, chatter, laughter, and song. Thank you.
Kathy Curto teaches at the Writing Institute at Sarah Lawrence College, at Montclair State University, and the Writer's Circle, as well as several nonprofit organizations and community centers here in the metropolitan area. She's the author of Not for Nothing, Glimpses into a Jersey Girlhood, and her writing's been featured in the New York Times, on NPR, and in many literary journals. Her memory piece about her mom, Still Cooking Side by Side, considered a modern love in miniature by the New York Times, was included in the Best of Tiny Love Stories last summer. Kathy lives with her family in Cold Spring, New York, but today recalls an episode from her youth on the Jersey Shore where she grew up, with a story called Closing Time. Please give a warm welcome to Kathy Curto.
I work at the car wash every day except Sunday. Get in at 8 in the morning and leave at 5:30. I let the last car go through at 5 because by the time I count my cash box and record the day's numbers, it's about 5:15, which leaves me the last 15 minutes to open the safe, put the money in, double check the master water valve, and triple check the breakers before locking up. But yesterday, a lady pulled up in an old rattling Buick at 5:10. I was counting the singles. When I looked up, she rolled down her window. "Sorry, we're closed," I yelled through the opening between the glass door and the little office space that is my grotto when we are slow and nobody wants shiny cars. It's where I read and wonder what heaven looks like. She yelled back, "Please, sugar, my girl needs a cleaning real bad." I shoved the stack of singles in my pocket and walked toward her and her Buick. The hood was speckled with residue of rust and bird shit. Her stubby, dry fingers flew across the dusty maroon dashboard. Coffee-stained letters and what looked to be unopened bills fell to the floor of the passenger side. I leaned into her open window to say, "I started closing out my cash box already, ma'am. Sorry." But then I smelled a weird combination of salami and rubbing alcohol. My eyes moved from her fingers to her hair, which was black and greasy, but some was gone. Portions of her scalp showed. "Yeah, I guess she kind of does," I said, and turned away to look at the main operating panel that held the buttons for all the washes and waxes and shine options. Then I looked at the grimy hood of her Buick, the car she calls her girl. Then I looked at the hairless spots on her head. "Please, sugar," she pleaded. "I got a 5 here somewhere." She turned away and opened the glove compartment. Now it was ketchup packets and what looked like an old black and white photograph of a man in a soldier's uniform that fell to the floor, landing on top of the letters and bills. "Why don't you just go ahead and take your foot off the brake and put it in neutral, ma'am? I got this one today." Free washes don't happen every day here. It's company policy to save the free washes for the good customers, people who are regulars. I never saw this woman before, not even once. She's definitely not a regular. She's very much irregular. And that's the reality that knocked me down. her irregularity and all that went with it, the smell of salami, the bird shit, the old ketchup packets, her girl, that Buick, all of it, all of a sudden it mattered. I thought, what if? I imagined her sitting in a fancy swiveling beauty parlor chair, her legs crossed, a cup of tea in one hand and a slick women's magazine in the other, her hair being styled in a shiny high beehive. I looked one more time at the soldier boy on the floor. Then I pushed hard on the blue button labeled The Works and watched her and her girl fade into the last wash of the day.
Jennifer Rawlings is an award-winning writer, performer, and filmmaker who's appeared on Comedy Central, CMT, PBS, VH1, A&E, CNN, HLN, and in the film I Am Battle Comic. She has 2 popular TEDx talks, and her solo show, I Only Smoke in War Zones, tours globally. Jennifer was named one of the 21 changemakers of the 21st century by Women's E! News, and her directorial debut, Forgotten Voices, Women in Bosnia, screens at film festivals and universities worldwide. Rawlings has written for television, books, film, and for several publications, including the New York Times. She is a proud mother of 5 who splits her time between New York and Los Angeles, and today recalls a memorable New Year's Eve with an Alaskan Auld Lang Syne. Please give a warm welcome to Jennifer Rawlings.
New Year's Eve. It's time to sip champagne, sing Auld Lang Syne, unless, of course, you're a stand-up comedian. Then, New Year's Eve is a work day. Let me tell you about one New Year's Eve in Alaska. Have you ever been to Alaska? Well, it's north of Oregon, north of Washington, and north of my favorite part of the United States, Canada. Alaska has a lot more men than women, so it's all guns and moose and drinking. It's basically a bar that was given statehood. Now, the first time I worked in Alaska, I was a young comedian, and I was performing at this 700-seat venue, and I was the middle act. So there was a group. I was to follow this dance troupe that opened the show. I showed up early with my notes in hand and wearing a black blazer and jeans, not too much cleavage, closed-toe shoes. Then the dance troupe showed up. They had stilettos and sequins and feathers and garters and thongs. I would be doing my, "Hi, I'm Jennifer from Kansas," clean comedy act after a dance troupe called the Bush Company. They were strippers. Now, the next time I performed in Alaska was on New Year's Eve. It was a 20,000-seat arena. I was touring with this country band, Lone Star. Baby, I'm amazed by you. Okay? All right. So, this was a big deal. I mean, playing an arena on New Year's Eve, even for a comedian, it's a nice payday. But I'd heard that the promoter was a bit of a weasel, and I was really worried about getting paid. My agent said, "Don't fret, your money will be at sound check." Sound check came, sound check went, no check. I was stressing. I have 5 kids, and they all like to eat. I needed that money. I tried to call my agent, then my manager, but it was New Year's Eve and they were having fun. Desperate, I called Lone Star's road manager to see if they had been paid. They were. "No problem," he says. "I'll make sure that your check is in your dressing room when you get to the show tonight." I get to the venue, no check. I see the promoter and I ask him, "Would you believe it?" he says. "I gave the last check to Lone Star. The cash box didn't show up. Blah, blah, blah. I promise I will FedEx you the check on Monday." Now, I'm contracted to do 45 minutes of stand-up before Lone Star comes on. And if I don't do it, I won't get paid at all. And I know that this guy is going to look for any excuse that I've broken my contract so that he cannot pay me. So I must hold to every single part of the agreement. Do 45 minutes, not 44 and not 46. Now on stage that night, it is brutal because the sound mix got changed from the sound check, so only the people on the floor of the arena can hear me. And I see people passed out, I see people throwing up, and then this heckler screams, "Take it off, lady!" I wonder if it's somebody from the Bush Company. Finally, my time in hell comes to an end, and it is 11:45 p.m. on New Year's Eve. I walk off stage, and the crowd is going wild. Lone Star! Lone Star! I'm sweating, but at least I haven't breached my contract. In the wings, the band members and the promoter are all giving high fives. And then Richie, the lead singer from Lone Star, looks at me, and over the stomping feet and the roar of the crowd, he says, "Have you been paid yet?" "No." "Well," Richie says to the promoter, "we're not going on stage until Jennifer is paid." It's 11:48, and the promoter is like, "I'm out of checks. The cash box isn't here." 11:49, the rafters are shaking in the arena, and 20,000 people are still screaming, "Lone Star! Lone Star! Lone Star!" At 11:50, the promoter runs to the office, and he returns with a bag of cash. "Are you sure you're going to be okay with all this cash?" he says to me. "Cash is just fine." And at midnight, as Lone Star sings Auld Lang Syne, I sway along backstage with crisp $100 bills safely tucked into my bra. I learned that from the strippers at the Bush Company. Okay, I'm really excited. Read 650 founder and editor Edward, is a writer whose features and essays have been published in a lot of national magazines and literary journals, including Malou, The Sun, The Irish Echo, and others. An award-winning television and a producer, Ed's essay, Pregnant Again, way to go, Ed, was selected as in the anthology Listen to Your Mother by Penguin Books. Ed grew up in Queens and Brooklyn, but due to circumstances well outside of his control, spent his adolescence in a retirement community in Central Florida. He wrote about that time in the piece you're about to hear, and he closes Time and Money show today with Working Papers. Please give a big hand for Ed McCann.
Thank you, Sweets. Thank you, Jennifer. I was 12 years old when my parents sold our house in Queens and moved with my older brother and me to Deltona, a retirement community in Central Florida where elderly men putted golf balls into cups on their lawns, and occasional posses of elderly women could be seen pedaling giant tricycles through the streets. This was not the best place to be 12. Everything was alien and new, including the thick green lawn surrounding our house. Neither my older brother nor I had ever touched a lawnmower before, and as first-year Floridians, we argued about whose turn it was, as if cutting the grass were actually a privilege. An elderly neighbor soon offered me $10 to cut her lawn. $10 was more than my weekly allowance, and I could earn it in just a couple of hours. Grass grows fast and thick in Florida, and my new gig put cash in my pockets for the first time in my life, enabling me to buy model car kits, a 10-gallon aquarium filled with tropical fish and a bubbling treasure chest, and the first store-bought gifts I ever gave my mother. Business expanded when my neighbor introduced me to her widowed friend a few streets over who needed her lawn mowed, and within a month, I'd taken on a third elderly customer even farther away from home. With my inner entrepreneur awakened at 13, I purchased a new mower that I towed behind my bicycle as I pedaled along the winding streets of our sleepy development, steering with one hand while maintaining my grip on the mower's handle with the other. I quickly learned that summer in Central Florida is scorching hot and miserable. Tromping back and forth behind a push mower while trickling perspiration burned my eyes and soaked my shorts soon got old, and my interest in cutting other people's grass faded, even as my tan and my voice deepened. Dad said I was building character, but I thought maybe I already had enough character. And I was sure I'd had enough with the lawn mowing. I wanted a real job. Unfortunately, I had to wait until I was 14 when the state would issue my underage working papers. Dad signed my application on my 14th birthday, and I returned it to Mr. McGinnis, the school guidance counselor. In exchange, I received a blue, wallet-sized work permit, my entree into semi-adulthood, and a passport to my first real summer job. I was eager to stop working outside in that oppressive heat and humidity, to leave behind those overgrown lawns and the trickling perspiration that burned my eyes and soaked my shorts. I applied for jobs around town, calculated bike routes, and imagined my air-conditioned self working behind a cash register opposite my new friends from work. I was thrilled to be hired at TG&Y, the discount department store anchor of a busy, sparkling new shopping center with palm trees in its parking lot. I was shown how to punch in and out for my shift. I was taken on a tour of the aisles, the stock room, and the layaway cages. I used my employee discount to buy a new work shirt and tie to wear beneath my dark blue smock. I felt proud to see my name professionally printed on a plastic placard pinned to the polyester. And Mom took my photo wearing it when she and Dad dropped me off for my first shift, the day I learned, too late, how I would actually be spending my summer. I was given a box cutter and escorted through the stockroom onto a loading dock flanked by a pair of giant dumpsters. The black top below was littered with bulging trash bags and dozens of cardboard cartons in every size, with more arriving every hour, boxes that had contained the merch that was now displayed on the shelves. My new, on-the-books, minimum wage summer job was trash jockey, breaking down and flattening boxes and filling the dumpsters while standing beneath the relentless Florida sun on blacktop in a polyester shirt, tie, and smock as trickling perspiration burned my eyes and soaked my shorts. Would all the writers come on up and join me? We built Read 650 around live performances like this one, and suddenly in March of 2020, it wasn't safe for us to gather in person, and we struggled for months to find a way forward, to find a way to serve our mission. And this past spring, as I mentioned, we were invited to be part of Carnegie Hall's Voices of Hope Festival and launched that half-hour podcast featuring stories that we record at events like this one. That invitation from Carnegie Hall gave us a path forward, and we pivoted in a way that allows us to feature work from writers around the country and even writers from outside the country. And we've now released 60 half-hour episodes, and we hope that you will listen and check out the podcast and tell your friends and all of that. We are a small group of volunteers doing it all, putting these books together, building social media posts, fundraising, producing the podcast. And if there's anyone here in the house who would like to lend their time and expertise to help steer and grow this organization, please do get in touch. I'm very proud of what we've built together with your support. And countless nonprofit organizations have failed and closed during the last 2 years, but we have not. I'm very grateful we're still here and growing, and grateful for all of your support, because we simply can't do what we do without you. You're the reason we're here, and this round of applause from all of us is for all of you. So. Thank you once again for joining us today. And don't rush off while there are still books to buy, wine to drink, and people to meet. If you enjoyed yourself today, please do join our mailing list. I think there is a clipboard going around. There'll be another one at the book table out there. And also flag your calendars for Sunday, May 1st. We're going to be back here with a show called What's So Funny, and the entire cast will be comprised of New Yorker cartoonists. And we are very excited about this. We don't know quite where this is going. I think it's a bit like herding cats, but they're writers and they're stand-up comics, and we're really psyched about how this is coming together. So thank you once again, and we have 2 pieces of housekeeping yet to do. One is something that we've never rehearsed before. We're going to do it for the first time. We're going to take a bow. Come on, everybody. Let's go. All right, come on out here. But wait, there's more. Aaron, if you could bring the lights up a bit. I mentioned earlier that we have an honorary guest here in the house, National Treasure Malachy McCourt, who I think it's entirely appropriate in honor of St. Patrick's Day this week. Malachy has something that he would like to contribute to our event this evening. Wasn't that right, Malachy? Yes. So, can you bring the lights up, Aaron? Can you bring them up?
I can't get up there, though.
Right. So let's hear it. Go ahead. What do you think?
I am not a singer, and I will now prove it. As Donald Trump said to each of his wives, I won't keep you long. The summertime is coming, and the trees are sweetly blooming, and the wild mountain thyme grows around the blooming heather. Will you go, lassie, go? Sing the song, children. And we'll all go together to the wild mountain thyme, all around the blooming heather. Will you go, lassie, go? One more time. And we'll all go together to the wild mountain thyme, all around the blooming heather. Will you go, lassie, go? Live every day as if it's going to be your last, because one day you'll be right.